All right.
All right.
All right. Welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode of
The Hafu It. Oh.
We're your hosts. I'm Kyoko.
I'm Sakura.
And this week we are talking about Kintsugi.
Kinsugi.
And before we get into Kintsugi, again, we wanted to remind all of you that we have a really exciting project coming on in May for Asian History Month as part of the ExplorASIAN Festival in partnership with the Vancouver Japanese Language School. Super exciting 4-episode series talking about Japanese Canadian heritage in relation to mine and Sakura's heritage, all of our stories, all of the stories that you haven't heard so far, believe it or not, because there aren't a lot of boundaries on this podcast. It seems.
My God.
But yeah, and it'll also be our YouTube video debut. A debut.
We love.
So there will be some exclusive content on there. So if you're not familiar with our YouTube channel, make sure you wander on over, and we'll remind you where to find us at the end of this episode.
I love that.
So let's get into Kinsugi.
Let's get into it.
So for those who don't know, how we normally structure our episodes, we normally do a little bit of like a history minute. So we'll start off with that, especially because Kinsugi is a much more lesser well-known, I think, Japanese term or concept,
and some of our listeners might be outside of the community.
Totally,
and
yeah. Kinsugi is a Japanese
They're here
term.
to learn.
Yeah,
as
we're
we
here
all
to
are.
Learn.
I mean,
our tag is history, so here we go. So poetically translated, Kinsugi translates to golden joinery. It's also known in Japan as Kintsukurai.
Yes.
Kintsukuroi, sorry. And it's like a centuries-old Japanese art of fixing broken pottery. So rather than like rejoining ceramic pieces with a camouflaged adhesive, which is kind of what we're used to here, Kinsugi technique employs like a special tree sap liqueur that's dusted with powdered gold, silver, or platinum, but most often it tends to be gold. And then once completed, it's like really, really beautiful golden glint seam, and the conspicuous cracks of the ceramic wares give like a one-of-a-kind appearance to each repaired piece.
I mean, in my opinion, it sometimes just makes it more beautiful than it was before.
100%. And that's kind of what I have found most interesting about Kinsugi, is that it actually comes from 3 different Japanese philosophies. Wabi-sabi, which usually calls for seeing beauty in the flawed or the imperfect.
Right.
There's the Japanese feeling of mottainai, which expresses regret when something is wasted, as well as mushin, the acceptance of change. So all of that is really, really beautiful. I think I stumbled upon Kintsugi fairly recently, actually. But I thought that the concept itself was really beautiful in just the preservation of objects.
Yeah.
It shows like a good respect for the history and origins of those objects.
Right.
So each the method of Kintsugi usually celebrates each artifact's unique history by emphasizing its fractures and breaks instead of hiding or disguising them, and often makes the repaired piece even more beautiful, as Sakura said.
Yeah.
Some history there, some origins. Apparently it's not super clear where Kinsugi really comes from, but a lot of historians believe that it dates back to the 15th century. And according to legend, the craft commenced when Japanese shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa sent a cracked tea bowl to China to undergo repairs, and he was extremely displeased upon its return to Japan because it was repaired using some really ugly metal staples. Yeah. According to legend.
Oh my God.
And that motivated contemporary craftsmen to find an alternative, more aesthetically pleasing method of repair. So by the 17th century, Kintsugi had become much more common practice in Japan. And according to a historian named Louise Court, it was during that time that a Japanese warrior infamously purchased, broke, and repaired standard tea bowls in order to make a profit. So that seems to indicate that, like, by the beginning of the 17th century, kintsugi was kind of a more commonly used technique for repairing, or at least when it came to ornamenting and ceramics for tea. So that's kind of a really basic background on kintsugi.
Yeah. I just like the idea of um, embracing the imperfections of something.
Yeah,
I think in a lot of aspects of people's lives, perfection is kind of what you're aiming for
yeah.
or what you're expecting or what you're hoping to achieve. So I think allowing something to be imperfect and seeing the beauty in it is amazing.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be in contemporary culture, at least in Western culture, like an erasure of historical items or items that were made a long time ago. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying like obviously there's like the vintage trend and stuff like that, but I think in regards to when old things break, there's kind of an erasure of that, right? Like we in Western culture would just throw something like that out.
Mama, it's not even if it's old. If
Yeah.
you're just,
Yeah.
you could have bought it
You bought it
last year and you're just
yesterday.
like, "Ugh, I'm over
It
it."
snapped. Yeah, even
Yeah.
our friend at work last week, I accidentally broke their mug. It just like broke while I was trying to wash it.
Kyoko-san.
And my first instinct was, oh, well, I guess I'm going to have to buy him a new one. And he was like, oh no, like we'll just go get some super glue, yada yada. And that made me think again of kintsugi because I've kind of been pondering that technique for a long time, and I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
wonder what of mine I would use the kintsugi method to repair
Yeah.
something. I guess like if it meant enough, but again, maybe again that's like another difference between our valuing of items versus how uh, the Japanese value their items because something that I've heard, I'm sure there's a term for it, but I can't think of what it is right now. It's like the Japanese have such respect for their like their possessions that um even if they knocked the table or something, they're like, sorry, table son, like sorry, you know, it's just treating everything that you have with
Yeah.
the utmost respect, which
Totally.
I think is a really, really beautiful idea. Shouldn't be beautiful because um it should just be more common, I think, to treat
Yeah.
your things with respect. But obviously we're very privileged in that everything is super accessible
Yeah.
and
And
replaceable.
relatively cheap.
Relatively cheap, yeah, lots of mass produced
Mm-hmm.
items.
Inferior quality, but
Inferior
cheap
quality.
and easy access.
Yeah. Fast shopping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So there are three predominant styles of kintsugi. There's crack, piece method, and joint call. So while each case, like gold, silver, platinum, dusted epoxy, is used to fix the broken pottery, the techniques and finished results vary pretty wildly, apparently. So objects used, or objects that are mended using the crack approach are touched up with minimal liqueur. And the most common kintsugi technique, and its culminates in the shimmering veins that have come to define the art form. So it's probably one of the most well recognized images of kintsugi art.
Right.
Is those gold veins that kind of go down the cracked ceramics. There we go.
Yeah.
The piece method works with restoring replacement fragments, replacing things with replacement fragments made entirely of epoxy. So that's when you start to see more like spotty patches of gold or silver or platinum in broken pottery.
Mm-hmm.
And then joint call is it's when you take pieces that are fixed using uh, it's when you take similarly shaped pieces from other broken wares, combining two aesthetically different works,
That's cool.
and then
Yeah.
making it into one uniquely
A, mo-
unified
a
product.
mosaic, if you will.
A mosaic, yeah, 100% a mosaic. which is also really cool because it turns it into something slightly different.
Right? And
Mm-hmm.
equally as beautiful.
Equally as beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think it's like ingrained in our culture. Japanese people are just very non-wasteful. I think for my family, it was a combination of my family being like incredibly impoverished,
Mm-hmm.
and also being Japanese immigrants who weren't coming from like incredibly well-off families. My Oba-san would just keep everything, like absolutely everything. Like I think even as she was passing away, we found like tools that had belonged to her father that were from like the 1930s, and she still had them in the 2000s. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
these have definitely not been touched ever. I've never seen you use them, but you've moved them now from several different provinces and you've
Yeah.
just been bringing them
You
with
brought
you.
it with you. Yeah.
And my mom like never understood why my dad wanted to like keep everything and was very, very intense about not throwing anything out, especially if there were things that were from like his
Mm-hmm.
side of the family. My mom could never understand. But I like understood. There was like an old metal dustpan that belonged to my Oba-san, and my dad just refused to throw it out. And we had a bunch of other dustpans that like actually worked. This one
Mm-hmm.
was so warped and
Yeah.
bent that you couldn't get dust into it, but he just refused to get rid of it. And my mom just could not comprehend why he wouldn't just throw it
Yeah.
out. But yeah, I think that's just a very cultural thing amongst us Japanese Canadians, that we
At
just like
least, yeah.
hold on to everything. So it just makes sense that something would develop over time to repair your ceramics.
Yeah, it's
That just makes
interesting.
sense.
Yeah, totally interesting too that it stems from like as early as the 15th century or as late as the early 17th century. Um, Considering how, I mean, I'm sure there are a bunch of different factors that play into why at least the Japanese Canadian community is so possessive over their things or
Ah!
like
I
really
mean,
like
it could
cares.
be. Ah!
I wasn't
I
gonna.
mean,
It's
that.
anyway, yeah, there are lots of other factors that kind of contribute to that, but I think it's interesting to think of it as something that's a little bit more long-standing of a value of a tradition.
Yes.
That's 100% relatable because my dad is exactly like that even now.
Yeah.
There are so many things that are just around the house that he has, and he's like, "Oh, like I got it and it's broken, but I haven't gotten rid of it because I'm gonna fix it." But
But
you know that he'll
three
never
years
fix it.
later, you're like,
You know that he'll
so.
never fix it.
Sugimoto-san.
Yeah, I'm like kind of like that too, where I am a bit of a hoarder. Like I'll keep everything
Yeah,
for no inherent reason
100%.
until like a bunch of years later, where I'm like digging through my junk box and I'm like, damn, why have I kept all of this crap for so
Oh
long?
my
There's no
God.
reason for it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, 100% a value that's been passed on. But it's interesting to think about the Japanese as not wasteful because when you're in Japan, arguably, like environmentally at least, there's just so much extra packaging to
So much
things that
plastic. Yeah,
doesn't like need to be there.
right.
But wait, like that's not what we're talking about in regards to like resourcefulness of the Japanese people
Yeah,
or keeping things the way that they are. Like a really good example is how good they are at making use of very small spaces.
yeah. Oh no, we've
Even with the,
mastered
like
that,
they're
honey.
really good at organization and cramming
Yeah,
things. uh Probably because
Marie
lots
Kondo.
of overproduction. Oh my god, our girl
Kondo-san.
Mary, our girl Marie Kondo.
Kondo-san.
Yeah, Kondo-san.
Ah! Yeah, no, we are the masters of confined spaces.
Yeah, and that's fair too because like with the preservation of things in Japan, and it also like no. Okay, here I'm gonna go on a slight tangent.
Here we go.
You at
Buckle
least
up.
you're getting like a warning this time instead of
Oh
you're just like suddenly
my
like, wait,
God.
what episode am I listening to?
Wait, what happened?
Um, I think that the preservation of things makes a lot of sense to the Japanese community
Yeah,
because in Japan, a lot of things get lost through natural disasters,
Yes.
right? Like
every other day.
Like every other day,
There's
there's an
something.
earthquake, there's a tsunami,
Mama.
there's a typhoon that comes
Yes.
through when it's heavy rain season.
Yeah.
Your local, like if you're from the countryside, if you're from the Inaka, like your local shrine could just be washed away in like a mudslide. Like there's no
Yeah.
And then suddenly your family's koseki gone forever, because Japan is also a paper country. Paper-based country. 100%. There's no online records, I think. And like the super surprised me when I was doing personal research for my family is that they only started to slightly translate things over to digital in like 2007. Maybe 2004, but like the early 2000s, and you're like, it's 2021.
Yeah, who knows what could have been lost?
100%. There's I know for sure that a lot of my family records, like the samurai specific records, are lost to sea somewhere.
Yeah.
Because my family's from the south of Japan, where there's always lots going on weather-wise.
Gorgeous.
It's also, where the Battle of Genghis Khan was set to happen had Genghis Khan not been washed away to sea as well.
I mean, that happens so many times. Yeah. Every time China tried to invade Japan, a different natural disaster would like wipe out their fleet. Yeah. Don't mess with the Sea of Japan.
Don't mess with the Sea of Japan.
Don't come for us.
But it's interesting that everything is still kept on paper, because then it's like, oh, like it's a tragic loss to lose those things, especially when they value that information.
Yeah, it's like why don't you digitize it?
Why don't you digitize it? You're a first world country.
Get with it.
And they're like ahead of their time in the digital media.
100%. And we're so ancestry based. It's like, why wasn't that the first thing?
Yeah. Like you literally, the head of each family is called the honke.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who have like your main family shrine. Yeah. They keep your koseki, like physically they have the main shrine for your ancestors in their house in the honke. So yeah, I don't know. It makes like absolutely no sense to me that with such a respect for the preservation of ancestral documents and traditions and culture, that you wouldn't translate all that stuff into like a digital form. It makes no sense. It's also it makes it very difficult to translate that stuff, because you can only Google Lens translate
so much,
like so many things, because everyone's handwriting varies and it doesn't pick up handwriting or calligraphy the same way.
And that's too, it's not like it's like a typed out. No, it's a handwritten account.
Yeah. Oh, annoying. Anyway, sorry, end of tangent. But somewhat related, because it connects to kind of maybe why Kinsugi or concepts like that and values like that, like wabi-sabi and whatnot, have come up.
Yeah.
And been developed into actual techniques to help preserve things.
When you were in Japan, did you see any kintsugi?
I don't know.
To sell?
Like not on my...
No shops?
Not in my immediate memory, but I don't think I knew about Kinsugi when I was in Japan, so I feel like if I had seen anything...
Did you hit up any like museums?
No, because it was COVID. Everything was closed.
Right. Yeah. Because I'm sure they have like a Kintsugi like museum where they showcase
just, like in some of the old. Because I'm sure, I'm sure some of the museums must have like pieced together old archival.
Yeah, or just older pieces of Kintsugi from from a century ago. Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's a really good point. Yeah. No. I don't think that I did.
Yeah, everything was closed.
See any Kinsagi, or I think that if I did see it, I just registered it as, because I think, like, at the back of my mind, I recognize the image of a tea bowl with gold veins running through it. Like, but I think I just assumed that was painted on or something.
Because I didn't know that Kintsugi meant what it meant, but the second you started describing what it was, I was like, oh, 100% I know what that is.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Hell yeah. Like...
Totally. Yeah, I think I just always, like, I definitely have always associated the image of Kinsagi with Japanese pottery. Oh, yeah. But I I always thought that it was just painted on veins. Like I didn't realize that it was
That
that
it
it
was
had a
like a piece
meaning, that it
together,
was pieced
like,
together and
yeah,
repaired object.
totally.
Um, you once told me a story about how your friends, because we were talking about
Oh yeah.
there's a difference of value in Western culture over objects that are
Yeah.
passed down through generations versus when you're from a culture like Japan or Southeast Asia or
Yeah.
some other cultures that have things that have been passed down from generation to generation to generation.
Totally.
Um, you want to
Yeah,
talk about
so
that?
my Obasan unfortunately passed away while I was in middle school, or it was like first year in high school. Um so when I ended up moving away from home, I had all of my Obasan's like kitchenware,
Mm-hmm.
all of her plates and stuff like that. I felt very honored to be able to inherit all of her stuff. Um, Anyways, I inherited this really nice tea set. It wasn't a Japanese tea set or anything like that, but it was a tea set that my Obasan owned. And I was taking something out of my kitchen cabinet. I accidentally bumped it and it fell out of the cabinet onto the kitchen counter and it broke. I had two of my friends over, and they were both Caucasian. And the intense reaction, like visceral, like body, spiritual reaction that I
Yeah.
had from breaking something that belonged to my grandma was so intense. I wasn't like audibly crying, but tears were like streaming down my face. I was so upset. And
Devastated.
yeah, they were just looking at me like, what's going on? And I was like, I explained to them like what had just happened, and they were like, so? Like they were so
Yeah, they don't get it.
confused.
They're like, so throw it out.
Yeah, like get another one, like who cares?
Yeah.
Like kind of thing. So I just remember like collecting the pieces up and like going into my bedroom and closing the door and just sitting there in silence crying and like looking
Yeah.
at the pieces in my hand. And I was in my room for probably like half an hour. Then I came out and they were kind of like looking at me like, is she okay? Like what's going on? I was like, you just don't understand.
Yeah.
Like
You wouldn't
you
know.
wouldn't understand. But looking back on that, it would have been so nice if I had kept that and then
Mm-hmm.
pieced it back together,
Yeah.
and created some kintsugi. But yeah, it was just really, really funny the contrast between like Caucasian culture and how Caucasians view, and obviously two people is not a representation of like the entire
No.
community, but just seeing like they couldn't even begin to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah, like because we got into this conversation because we were talking about how my mother's great grandfather fought in World War I or something like that and
mhm.
came back with medals. And I only remember this from like a very young age, like discovering the medal and my mom like explaining very vaguely what had
Yeah.
happened and like who it was of or whatever. And um we to this day have no idea where it is anymore. I have no idea what happened to it.
And you
My
don't even know
mom,
what the medals
I don't even
were.
know what the medals were. She didn't know because
Yeah.
she didn't like have enough, I guess, like respect for that
Ah!
or whatever. But like you have to be extremely accomplished
To
to
get
earn medals in the
medals,
war. And it was like medals
100%.
plural. I remember very clearly. And yeah, I don't know. My mom loses things super easy, so it's gone. Like we have no idea where those are.
Yeah.
And it's just no, like big whoop to my mother, right? Like no big deal
Oh, yeah,
that it's
doesn't
gone.
even,
Whereas
yeah.
if that was something like for
You
example, like all you guys will get to hear this story a little bit more detail during our partnership for the Exploration Festival in May.
yeah.
But my family during the war had a samurai sword, our family sword,
Yes, here we
taken
go.
from us.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to track it down past a certain time. So we have no idea where it is. And that's like a loss that has been felt through the generations.
100%.
It's
Intergenerational
intergenerational
trauma.
trauma. Say it with us,
Oh my
everyone.
God.
Yeah,
Truly.
but like something like that, even I don't have a lot of knowledge on our specific samurai family like
Your
branches
lineage.
in our lineage,
Yeah.
because a lot of that information has been lost to the sea, the Sea of Japan
Specifically.
specifically. But I know that that sword had like our Kemon on it. It had our family crest on
Yeah.
it. And it was just gone. It was sold off. And I think my dad made some efforts to track it down, and he tracked it down to some thrift shop in Vancouver in like the
Oh,
early
I love that.
2000s that had shut down by the time my dad got out
Yeah.
here to find it.
We love that a treasured family heirloom that was stolen from you ends
Yeah.
up at a thrift store.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into
Gorgeous.
more like yeah, I as
My
much as I
blood
want to
is
get yeah,
my blood is
as much as I want to
boiling.
get into this like a little bit more, we have to save it for our very special episodes coming up.
Yes.
But yeah, interesting to think about possessions like
Yeah.
that.
Even when you were telling me the story about your mom's father's
Yeah,
medals, I'm not even from your family, and I just started getting this visceral, like, I
yeah.
can't believe when you
That
told me,
it's
I was
just
like,
gone.
like she didn't keep them at, like I was
Yeah.
so confused. You
Yeah.
were like, no, dude.
Yeah, it's just
You're like,
gone. My mom's like, whatever. Like,
I can't.
and obviously, like, there are a lot of Caucasian families that have their, their family's war medals still and value that and whatever.
100%.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying that my experience with that is very just like nonchalant versus my Japanese side, which has a lot more honor to the pieces that have been
Yes.
passed down to us.
3
through the
generations later,
generations.
where is the sword?
Where is the sword?
Where is the sword?
And yeah, conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that just is like an example of just the differences between how some things are valued between different cultures, right?
100%.
Obviously that it's it's a little different than like having a pottery piece that's like shattered in front of you.
Yeah.
But when my great grandmother died, well, I had already inherited a lot of the Japanese dolls that she and my great grandfather had brought back from Japan during one of their visits to see the fam. And yeah, I feel like if anything was ever to happen to those, and I have like bird bone tea cups and plates
Oh shit.
in my apartment
That's
from them.
crazy.
And they have like gold on it. I forget what the art technique was, but it's like the indigo gold combination on
Okay.
porcelain when it's like painted.
Oh.
They have information on it at the Vancouver Anthropology Museum. If anyone is around and wants to go
Yeah.
to UBC to the Anthropology Museum, there's like an entire room of history of ceramics and such. But anyway, so it's like a really old method of art in Asia, in Eastern Asia, and I have 2 cups from whatever collection that I have. I'm pretty sure they spread it out between their favorite family members.
Oh my god.
But that's what I have left from them.
Gorgeous.
Left over. And I don't have a lot of their stuff. A lot of it is still in storage.
Right.
But if that was to ever shatter, I'm really glad that I know that there is something like Kinsugi that actually holds meaning beyond just, okay, well, I guess I'll super glue this back together, or I'll try to glue it back together seamlessly. Because that's always also something that we're taught growing up, right? It's like, conceal, don't feel.
Yeah, make it perfect again.
Make it perfect again, so that no one knows that it was broken. But philosophically too, I think that that's a really important concept to be able to embrace is not hiding things that are broken or loving things for being broken.
And just because something breaks, it doesn't mean that it is now like forever weak.
Yeah.
You can repair it and it can become stronger and even more beautiful than it was before.
Yeah, because structurally that's true in Kintsugi. Whatever object that would become stronger by
yes.
being,
She
was being philosophical. Yeah. Yeah. And I love, we'll get into the philosophy of it all, but
gorgeous.
I think the philosophy is why that's such a beautiful notion, right?
Yeah, totally.
With all that, yeah. I don't think that I would have expected. I don't know. I was just about to say I don't know if I would have expected like a concept like that to come out of Japan because they're very anti-emotion.
Oh my god.
Very conceal, don't feel, don't let it show.
Just conceal. Yeah.
Very what's that term for it's already happened. Oh, shikataganai. It's already happened, so whatever. Don't talk about it. Don't whatever.
Yes.
I think it's nice. It's nice to know that they don't really apply that to their possessions.
Yeah.
That they reflect a lot of their respect for life in the things that are created.
Yeah. Totally.
And for as much as like Asian culture is talked about for like the mass production of things,
right,
it's cool that there's like things like this from the 17th 15th century that show that there is still a mass respect for
totally
the art of creation.
Yes.
And the formation itself.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have to look into it. I wonder if like other cultures like in Europe, I wonder if they had a similar form of repairing pottery.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like not necessarily the exact same, but I
Right.
wonder if they had some sort of method to take something that was broken and fix it but make it like beautiful. I'm trying to think.
Yeah. Like I was going to say, I wouldn't have been surprised if Japan had adopted that tradition from another East Asian country like China or Korea, given like our country's history.
100%.
But the way that it was described, at least by a couple different historians that I was reading about, it did in fact originate from Japan.
Because I don't recall seeing any sort of Chinese artifact or
with the gold veins running
with
through it.
that had broken and was repaired with the gold vein.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
It's probably a little different, like whatever.
But I'm sure they
methods
have
are
their
used for
version.
the preservation of history.
Yeah. Yeah, and not all cultures are probably like concerned with like keeping things.
Right. With upkeep.
With upkeep, you know.
Right, because the same is true in like the temples in Japan where things are repainted all the time and different scriptures are preserved. But that's true in just any type of, I don't know, archaeological environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Where things just need to be preserved. But I don't think it's as common to see items that have been repaired in a way that show that they have been broken.
Yeah.
I've seen things repaired in a way that hides it most often than not.
Yeah. They found like, what was it, like a year and a half ago, a little Japanese settlement up in the mountains by Vancouver.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they uncovered was a whole bunch of almost brand new looking ceramics. And I wonder if there was any Kinsugi repaired ceramics in that mix. I wonder where that stuff went. Probably the Nikkei Museum.
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, because I think we read this article together.
I think you found it.
Yeah,
and then you told me immediately.
Yeah, you got to send your Japanese related things to your Japanese friends. Keep connected to your Asian friends.
Oh my god.
But yeah, 100%. I don't know. I guess maybe it might depend on whether or not those items, because I feel like they would only have Kintsugi items if they were from Japan.
If they brought them with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Repaired that way, because
where would you find that stuff here? And as wealthy as I think some of the Japanese community was at the very beginning of their immigration here, right?
Bringing wealth over. Obviously, a lot of that deteriorated over time, and it's not like a lot of our possessions were respected in the way that we would have respected our stuff. So just for some background, this story was like they were suspecting that there was this settlement from Japanese Canadians who had escaped instead of being interned during the war.
Yeah.
So they had actually fled to the mountains where they continued to work as with logging companies, and I think that there were other people involved from the Caucasian community who helped them out, or from different cultures who helped them like make money so that it was sustainable.
Yeah.
But they found like a garden out there in the mountains in the forest, and they found like the foundations of
a bathhouse?
cabins and stuff like that. Yeah,
Didn't they find like a bathhouse too?
yeah, like a bathhouse. Yeah, totally. They found a
Yeah.
bathhouse and like a well and stuff like that. So they had actually like built
A
this
little
whole
settlement.
reservation,
Yeah.
settlement up in the mountains somewhere in BC. And they very recently, like 2 years ago or so, 2 or 3 years ago, discovered or started to uncover,
Excavate the site.
excavating the
Ooh.
sites with all these lost pieces of ceramics. And some of
Yeah.
them were obviously broken because I think they indicated that those people left in such a rush
Right.
from their settlement. They probably were discovered, or maybe they had to move settlements
Totally.
and had to leave everything behind.
Right.
But yeah, like Saku was saying, I'm sure in that situation I probably would have brought every like valuable piece of anything that I had with me if I was escaping, especially knowing what was going to happen to that
To
stuff
all of
later
our
on.
stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, it would be really cool. I think they did bring it to the Nikkei Museum out in Burnaby, so if anyone's out there, or maybe if we ever get out there, it'd be really cool to check out what they're doing with it.
Yes.
But yeah, I imagine that if there was anything that had Kinsugi, it would probably be a good teller that it was, or maybe of age.
Yes.
Because I suspect a lot of that a lot of those ceramics anyway would have been import from Japan.
Where would you get them here?
Yeah, because where would you get that stuff
Yeah.
here? So yeah, I guess my very long-winded answer is probably yeah, but it would have been done prior
Yeah.
to immigration.
Yeah.
And I wonder if those things were like inherited too for those people, or if they were purchased and then brought here
Right.
during immigration.
Yeah.
Back in the early 1920s. The 1920s was when our people arrived
Yeah.
to the West Coast.
I think we first started coming in like the late 1800s.
Right. Well, the late 1800s, we're like getting into full Japanese history. The late 1800s was like when the samurai age was supposed to be over,
Mm-hmm.
but there were still battles to be, because it was the beginning of the Meiji era,
Mm-hmm.
the end of the 1800s. So that was when there were still like Ruruni like walking around the Inaka with their swords, and they weren't supposed to be.
Gorgeous.
So there was like a war
Take my
between
sword from
the
me.
remaining samurai clans and
Yeah.
and the Meiji era government and the emperor
Gorgeous.
and so on. And a very famous general that I'll talk about during our heritage episodes because I have a funny connection to him.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, I don't know. I think in like the early 1900s to 1920s is when we started to immigrate up here. But I think we immigrated slowly, like first to the States, and I think a lot of us came from Hawaii. There was a lot of work in California and Hawaii.
100%. Yeah. The biggest population was in California.
California, yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, we wanted a chance to talk a little bit about the Japanese values of preservation, and we figured that Kinsugi would be a really good place to start a lot of the conversations, kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up on some different pieces of content that we'll be talking about throughout May.
Gorgeous.
And a little bit of like an introspect and reflection on our personal experiences with that and how it's translated to our lives in Canada.
Totally.
But I think that's it for Kinsugi.
That's it.
If any of you guys have any pieces of pottery that have been repaired through Kintsugi, we would love to see that.
Oh my God. You can get
Please take a
kits
picture.
too.
You can 100%
If
get
you guys
kits.
want for our YouTube channel for us to smash something and then put it back together, let us know.
Oh my God, to like purposefully smash something?
Just to practice, we could get something from a
Oh,
thrift
fair
store
enough.
and just nothing of ours.
Well, yeah,
I
I don't
would
know. We'll have to
smash-
do research on like how to best pay respect to that like art form.
Ah!
I wouldn't want to. Also, the kits are very expensive.
No doubt.
Obviously, because it's like powdered
Gold
in epoxy. But yeah, lots of kits like on Etsy.
Yeah.
Obviously, the much more expensive route, but we're all for promoting the support of
Hell yeah.
of our independent artists. But yeah, I'm sure you can find kits through more mainstream sources as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Nikkei Center sells a Kintsugi set
I'm sure they probably have classes
in their
too.
store. Probably sell what?
They probably have classes.
Oh, for Kintsugi classes? I think I saw an advertise. I don't know. For any of you Japanese Canadians out there, I'll say this like every episode. Just join the Facebook group. Join the Japanese Canadians Facebook group. And if you're not a part of it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not making a whole lot of sense right now. Great resources for Japanese lessons and such. Different events within the community. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Thank you guys. We know that this was a bit of a shorter episode.
This was a bit of a shorter one.
We're in the middle of planning a lot of lengthy content for you guys for Asian History Month. So, giving you what we've got.
We're giving you what we got.
We're giving you what we've got.
Oh my God.
Take what you get.
Yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find me on social media, you can find me at saku.miki. If you want to find just our podcast, you can find that on Instagram at Hafu It.
You can also find us on YouTube. I think we're called the Hafu It podcast on YouTube.
Gorgeous. We are, and we have 6 followers.
We have 6 subscribers.
So we are influencers now.
We are famous.
Our following is huge. So.
Yeah, and we're not saying that you should join the cult, but we're saying that you should join the cult. Anyway, so you can follow our general podcast updates and such on there. You can follow me specifically on many different platforms. Take your pick or take none at all.
Oh my
I'm
God.
on Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, and TikTok at This Is Kyoko.
Yes.
And make sure you follow along with ExplorASIAN Festival, as well as the Vancouver Japanese Language School on Instagram at VJLS-JH and ExplorASIAN Festival.
Yeah.
There's some super cool updates. Maybe I'll get to learn a little bit more about some other independent artists out there. I think we might be one of the only podcasts participating, but
yeah,
really cool to just keep in touch with the community.
Hell yeah.
On the topic of preservation of
totally
items and values.
I love that. And to the community, things are a little crazy in the world right now. So as always, be safe, be aware, be alert, be strong.
Yeah. And just go at your own pace with the way that things are in the world right now.
Yeah.
And for those of you out there trying to be allies to the Asian community, don't take it personally if, sometimes you're made to feel like it's not enough. Sometimes the type of emotions that come out of events that have been happening recently in our community create a space where we can't help you help us, but we see you and we appreciate you.
Yeah.
And everyone keep safe.
Keep safe.
We'll talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week. Bye.